Mark Bomford, who is a farmer, an educator, an advocate, and a leader. He's the founding director. He was the founding director for the Center for Sustainable Food at UBC, University of British Columbia in Canada. And since 2011, he's been the director of the Yale Sustainable Food Project.
Good morning. As a little bit of a warning, I was put on this panel as a bridge builder rather than a provocateur. So if you're all ready to get the difficult ideas digested and leap to their defense, that's not what I'm here to do. I was here actually to connect some of the dialogue that emerged from this weekend to a whole range of communities of study, of practice, and of activism connected right here to Yale. We have an incredible lineup of things which are happening this fall, and we're trying to join them somehow. In part, this is because the Yale Sustainable Food Project is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. And much like the 40th for the Journal of Peasant Studies and the 20th for Via Campesina, that kind of prompts a little bit more introspection and interest in how do we rejuvenate, reframe, and make more relevant than ever before. And so we're really eager through this dialogue to figure out what are some of the new ways of seeing, the big new questions that we can take forward, and how can we leave them undropped as we move into these dialogues through the fall. The ones that are coming up, and this is the announcement part, are pretty exciting actually. Most prominent at the end of October is the Yale Food Systems Symposium. It's organized primarily by the Student Coalition on Food and Agriculture at Yale, and it's geared especially to the emerging researchers and the emerging ideas. We're going to hear from some wonderful activists and academics, Saru Jayaraman from the Food Labor Research Center, Selvin Chambers from the Food Project, and Jahi Chappell from Washington State will all be joining us for that dialogue. And to get to that point, we've got a whole series of dialogues that will be webcast with the Center for Environmental Law and Policy happening almost every week between now and then. We're kicking it off with Tanya Fields from the Black Project in the South Bronx, where there's a real move to use urban agriculture to build empowerment, to build health. It's a fantastic project. Basically, this is reflective of the Yale Sustainable Food Project's changing theory of change. When we began, I think there was the idea that using a campus farm, we knew that we would be able to teach some things that could not be taught in the classroom. And that perhaps with a campus farm, you would be able to instill this stewardship ethic that all of the commentators had said was completely lacking from the discourse, from the analysis, and from the post-secondary experience. Our view of this has changed a little bit because it seems that plonking a student for 4 years on a campus farm by itself is not enough to basically build that stewardship ethic, because what that campus farm represents is very difficult to grapple with unless you actually begin to look at exchange and mobility. That is, bringing the people from around the world to come and talk about their projects, their contexts, and sending students out from the Yale farm around the world to see on the ground the various projects, the various contexts, basically make the links between what should not be viewed implicitly as a model farm, but rather is where you can understand the foundational principles that might be applied to the contexts and the struggles and the activism around the world. So this did change a little bit our idea of how you can embed rootedness, and the argument is that it's not by plonking someone down on a farm. So we need to move further afield. And that's why you'll see that our whole program, this fall and beyond, is very much focused on bringing in the food innovators, the food activists, especially folks who are younger in an emerging sector. In part, this is just strategic because we want Yale students to be able to we want the work to be able to resonate with them. We want them to be things that can be seen that they might be able to try as well in their career. So as we've been building out this program, trying to figure out how do we get Yale students around the world and how do we get around the world into Yale and how do we have this dialogue, it's been both inspiring but also incredibly frustrating. Inspiring, of course, because people are doing wonderful things. You find all of these tremendous examples of people who are completely reshaping their communities, building something new, creating power where there was no power before. But frustrating because again and again, as these people come and talk about their projects at all stages of the food system, you hear about how they have hit barriers. You hear about how the attempts to turn that spark into a fire have hit some kind of wall. This happens again and again, and it forces us to actually look at what's at the bottom of that wall, what's at the root of that problem. And of course, that's where, surprise, surprise, you see the big structural, systemic, and institutional barriers. And those structural, systemic, and institutional barriers are not abstract concepts, they are real people. And when you look at who those people are, you find, they're, as Jennifer was saying, they are in Wall Street, they're in the finance sector, they're in DC, they're people who are making policies. They're people who are shaping that entire regulatory framework. And if you actually ask not just what these are as abstract institutional concepts, but who these are as people, you find that these people disproportionately have passed through and are affiliated with institutions very much like this one, very much like Yale. And this is the profound opportunity that we have. Jennifer, in her talk about financialization, cited Fred Kaufman's book, Bet the Farm. This book, I think, did a really good job at talking about how financialization in the food sector is affecting the world and bringing it into a public audience. And I don't know if you've read this, but as you read this, the question that was going through my head again and again was, how did Fred manage to talk to these people? Why did they let him into their homes? Why was he able to get to all these people who are completely high up? Fred went to Yale. The people that he was talking to were the folks who his kids played soccer with their kids. They were the folks that he hung out with. I mean, their kids went to school together. They went to school together. This is where there's a very, very profound opportunity for change if we can actually engage Yale, not just for Yale's sake, but the institutions like Yale around the world. And that's the opportunity that we're trying to move towards. I'll finish by saying that inaction and our failure to engage these institutions right now is the biggest, probably negative action we can take at this point. You know the Macmillan? Okay, that was Whitney Macmillan. He was the CEO of Cargill until 95. If we don't engage the elites are going to do their own thing. They're going to have a tremendous impact, and we've seen how that will happen. So we can do it from here. So let's start talking together. Thank you.